Stress, certain medications, genetics, and high cholesterol are all known risk factors for type 2 diabetes, but being overweight or obese is an even stronger predictor. Being overweight may make your body susceptible to becoming resistant to insulin. Why, you may ask? Well, there's no simple answer. One explanation may be being overweight causes metabolic stress, which includes inflammatory responses in cells normally sensitive to insulin, which then become insensitive. Others say that the central obesity, meaning obesity around our organs, which depletes oxygen levels locally, is the main driver for being insulin resistant. It is, according to the American Diabetes Organization, estimated that almost 85% of people living with type 2 diabetes are either overweight or obese. This is important because globally we have a lot of overweight people. In fact, in 2014, 1 in 3 adults was overweight and 1 in 8 was obese. And as you can also see, we have since the early 1970s changed from a world in which underweight prevalence was more than double that of obesity to one in which more people are obese than underweight. But why do the numbers keep growing? What is causing this epidemic growth of obesity? Professor Steve Bloom might have an explanation.
We're a species that has died out in famines. We are famine survivors, the ones of us still alive, and that meant we were greedy and were fat before the famine occurred. So all the survivors of those endless famines are in fact overeaters. So we are naturally inclined to overeat. And when food supply is very plentiful, as it is in the modern world, we tend to get fat. And this then puts a strain on our metabolism and causes us to develop diabetes. So the simple suggestion, just eat less food, is easy to say and very difficult to carry out. I find that if somebody is serving chocolate biscuits at a meeting, I tend to have a few chocolate biscuits. I shouldn't, but I can't resist it. And that's the problem. We're designed to overeat to prevent us dying in famine. When there's plenty of food, we're in trouble. And we are, as a species, in trouble. Now, some people have tremendous iron will and manage to stay thin. Good on them. But that isn't the majority of us.
Could you just explain a little bit more about that?
So, as we've said before, obesity causes your insulin hormone not to work properly. And therefore, the body has to keep producing more and more insulin to overcome the insulin resistance that comes from being overweight. And eventually, you can't keep going. The cells producing the insulin actually get exhausted and die. And at that point, you need to go onto tablets and then injections of insulin. So that's why obesity is so bad for us. Unfortunately, the very simple recipe of eat less food and take more exercise, which we all advise patients, is not something that's very easy to do, because the human brain knows that if it doesn't overeat in the summer, come the winter when there's no food, you're likely to die. And so our appetites are adjusted to overeat whenever there's food available to prevent starvation in the winter killing us. As a net result, when there's a big supermarket full of delicious food, we tend to buy it and eat it, get fat, and then develop insulin resistance, and then get diabetes, and then get the consequence of diabetes, the poisoning by that high sugar, which causes us to go blind and lose our feet and get heart attacks and strokes and shortens our lives.
Professor Steve Bloom is not the only one who thinks that our problems with obesity are caused by our evolutionary history, where chronic undernutrition was the norm for most people, and so genetics have evolved to favour fat storage. According to, for example, Daniel Lieberman, chair of the Human Evolutionary Biology Department at Harvard University, the ability to gain weight when there is a surplus of food within reach is a crucial part of being human, and the importance of fat for survival has long been paramount in humans. But while, as it says in the Harvard Gazette, Our ancient ancestors' diet was heavy on tubers, fruits and vegetables and lean meat from game animals. Today's food is still more calorie dense and processed dishes are getting bigger and marketing of food more persuasive. Let us listen to Professor Arnie Astrup's words on why we overeat and how this is related to the composition of the diet we eat. Now, why are we eating more and becoming more obese and overweight?
Well, there's probably many factors. Now, I just returned from the United States, and the interesting thing is, if you look at the Scandinavian countries and United States, there is a huge difference. In the United States, it's 1 out of 3 adults who are obese, meaning that they have a body mass index of more than 30, whereas here in the Nordic countries, it's only half of that. It's maybe 16 or 18%. And we have actually seen that this curve going up has started to decline a little bit in Denmark, particularly among young people, teenagers.
Are we just naturally prone to overeat as humans?
I think so. It's more difficult to starve yourself to death than it is to overeat. But having said so, I think there's huge differences between people. And it really also depends on what you're eating, because some diets are very easy to overeat in, whereas other diets you cannot overeat. It's actually, if we take normal people who have difficulties to gain weight and try to overfeed them, we can overfeed them in lock them into the lab, but as soon as we release them, they go down right away. And it's exactly the same we more or less see with obese people. We can easily slim them down 10 or 20 kilos. But as soon as we release them, they regain and go back. So, the focus on simply reducing or increasing the amount of calories is not the way ahead, because the body do not really count calories. It counts carbohydrates, protein and fat, and also how much fat you have in your stores, in the fat stores. So we really need to look at the diet, what we are eating.
People probably know that exercise and eating less and healthier diets is good for you, but it's not really happening for people. As we know, diabetes is going up. So what else do we need to do?
It's really a complicated area, because we can see if we enroll people in trials and they follow the exercise and they eat the right diet for 6 months and then we stop, they will go back to their normal habits. But if we continue for 2 years maybe, a larger proportion of them will actually continue. So in some way it's something with changing habits. But also we are facing that for example, in the United States, it's very difficult to get all the healthy foods. Of course, there's a lot of fruit and vegetables, but if you take some of the carbs, a lot of the carbs are really refined carbohydrates. So having some whole grain bread and some really good bread is very difficult, if not impossible. So you see, it's also the availability of healthy choices is much better, for example, here in Denmark, but it's also an issue. Another factor that is quite important is the socioeconomic gradient, because even in Denmark, we see that the obesity is threefold, the rate of obesity is threefold higher among those with a short education as compared with those who have a long education. And it's telling us something about what is important, that of course you need a lot of knowledge, but you also need the resources, mental resources, economic resources, actually to decide to do something about it. And maybe many people who don't have these resources, they are facing so many other problems in surviving, that on the priority list, a good nutrition and all this is very low.
So the combination of diet with a high level of fat, sugar and carbohydrates, combined with scarce resources and a lack of access to healthy foods in disadvantaged communities, creates an even greater risk of getting obese. And once obese, damages to signaling pathways makes it increasingly difficult for the brain to measure food intake and fat storage, which is one of the very reasons why it's very hard to lose the extra kilos and to maintain the weight loss. Associate Professor Zina Turco has recently started a study based on the hypothesis that diet-induced weight loss maintained by way of physical activity combined with incretin-based treatment may be a new strategy for treating diabetes. Let's listen to what she has to say about this new approach.
It actually seems that exercise is superior to pharmaceutical agents in order to prevent diabetes. But what we don't know is whether you can combine pharmaceuticals with exercise and actually obtaining a much more healthy weight loss and thereby preventing diabetes.
Could you explain a little more about how this combination works?
Yeah, well, so we know that most obese people, they are able to lose weight by diet-induced weight loss, but the really big problem is how to maintain this diet-induced weight loss. And we know that pharmaceutical agents that actually reduce appetite are good to maintain a weight loss. And we know that exercise is good to maintain a healthy weight loss. So the combination with appetite inhibition by pharmaceuticals and exercise for a healthy weight loss should in theory give a much more healthy maintained weight loss in order to prevent diabetes.
Could you explain what the hypothesis of your study is?
We know that GLP-1, which is a hormone that reduces appetite, is actually very good in maintaining weight loss. And we know that exercise is also good at maintaining exercise. So our hypothesis is that when you combine both exercise and this appetite reducing agent, then you'll have a much more healthy weight loss. I mean, the type of weight loss where you reduce the risk of having comorbidities the most. So in a healthy weight loss, you really reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. There's been lots of study on acute weight loss. So most obese people are capable of losing weight and actually losing lots of weight. But the problem is that they always seem to gain weight again. So it's important to do these much more longer term studies. And also we've shown that just after weight loss, you have a huge increase in a hunger hormone. But after a year where you actually maintain this weight, it seems to be more normalized into the levels before the weight loss. So in theory, you have a new set point of appetite if you are able to maintain the weight loss for more than a year.
I'm interested to know, why not just treat the patients with medication?
Well, because we know that exercise works. The problem with exercise is that you have to do it all the life. So it's a lifestyle change, but we know it works. So we need to add that on to really have a healthy weight loss. But it might be easier for people to maintain the weight when you also have help by reducing appetite.
Are you finding anything surprising as you go along?
Well, we just initiated the study, but what we have found was that in Denmark at least, obese people that would like to join in on these kind of studies, they're actually doing quite a lot of exercise. So you can be obese and do lots of exercise. So that's also why we think that you need to do the combination with appetite reduction and exercise.
That's really interesting, because people may be saying, well, I am obese, I'm overweight, and I'm exercising. So why? Why am I not losing the weight?
Yeah, but that's probably due to this set point of appetite hormones. So whatever weight you have, when you lose weight, your appetite hormones will always react against you in order to maintain the weight that you had before. So that's why we think that you need to have help with the appetite reduction.
So maintaining a slim waistline becomes even more challenging for former obese people, because they burn less calories in the same exercise as people that are naturally the same weight. While there seems to be no easy way to fight obesity, the good news about diabetes is that in general treatments are very effective. The earlier we are diagnosed, the more can be done to improve the outcome and avoid the health problems associated with diabetes in later life, such as damages to the eye, kidneys and feet. Another piece of good news is that contrary to what was once assumed, not all obese people get diabetes. So why is that? Let's ask Professor Steve Bloom.
Some people seem to be able to get very fat and don't develop diabetes. Now, the overweightness causes your insulin not to work properly, and therefore you have to produce rather more of it. If you happen to have the producing tissue that makes the insulin and you have a lot of it, you won't run out of insulin. Some of us have more than others. It's genetic. You're born with more or you're born with less. It's a bit like some people being tall and other people being short, and it's a natural variation. But if you happen to have rather fewer islets, or they're not very strong, you will develop diabetes very quickly. If you have really plenty of islets and they're very strong, you might be obese for years and not get any diabetes at all. So it's kind of luck of the draw.
On a scientific level, research has proven that a subset of obese people have normal fasting glucose, triglycerides and other markers for metabolic diseases like diabetes. This group of obese people are often called metabolically healthy obese and are at no higher risk for type 2 diabetes or other cardiovascular disease than their metabolically healthy and lean counterparts. Unfortunately, only 6% of these who are obese are metabolically healthy, so this fact should not divert attention from the fact that roughly 2/3 of obese people get diabetes at some point in their lives, but we do not yet have an explanation for why some people with obesity become insulin resistant and others do not.